couple of weeks ago, I got a very interesting email from a viewer named Russell. He writes to me and says, Rex, I just dropped $350 on a Lee Nielsen No. 4 smoothing plane in bronze with a higher angle 50-degree frog, and it will not cut. And I thought, that does not make a lot of sense. Lee Nielsen planes are renowned for coming ready to go right out of the box. They're an extremely high quality company. They pride themselves on quality control. You're supposed to be able to pull the plane out of the box, put it on wood, and go. And I've used Lee Nielsen planes, and I think they're really great. So this was kind of surprising, but I thought, oh, maybe he doesn't have planes before. Well, we had a lot of email exchanges back and forth, and it turns out that, Russell's done some woodworking. He owns a low-angle jack plane that he has no problems with. He knows how to sharpen. He can shave hair off his arm with a blade, so it's not a sharpening issue. So I said, okay, what exactly are the problems with this plane? And he wrote back and he says that he cannot refine the shavings to be thin and wispy like he's seen even low-quality planes produce, that the plane is leaving ugly scratches in the wood that he never has with his low-angle plane. He says the adjuster feels very stiff, the lever cap is very difficult to use, he's just having problems with it all over the place. And here's a guy who's got a plane and knows how to sharpen, so it's not like he's completely new at this. And finally he says to me, listen, this is what I want to do. I want to send you the plane, I would like you to diagnose it and set it up on camera, and let's see what's going on. And I thought that would make a really good video. So Russell, pack that thing up very carefully and send it to me. And I have to give him credit, because when I told him to pack it carefully, he really, really took me seriously. Okay, so we're gonna do this video vlog style. No scripting and very minimal editing. We're gonna do everything live on camera, and then later on, we'll just cut out the boring parts. So it might end up being kind of a short video, but let's get this box open and see what's going on. I have not checked this plane out yet, so it's gonna be a surprise to me as much as it is to you. Here's the actual package. Wow, there's 2 boxes. He double boxed it. Russell, nice job, man. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ark of the Covenant. All right, let's have a look here. Okay, here's the plane. And so this is a bedrock pattern, No. 4 smoothing plane, very similar to the bedrock I just reviewed a couple weeks ago. I did an in-depth comparison between a bedrock and a generic Bailey pattern Stanley. So here's the bedrock. The Lee Nielsen is made in the same way, but it's hardly the same tool. This thing is made out of solid bronze with a higher angle frog and just really amazing, crisp machining all over the place. Some of the touches on this are really, wow, this is amazing. So right here, the lateral, that's just a disc on the Stanleys. There's actually a bearing there. That is a moving part. And then just this little nib on the back of the lateral here, that's actually tapped, and there's a pair of machine screws in there that holds that on. The Stanley just has a little part that's press fit on there, so the attention to detail on this is very impressive. Here's the iron and chip breaker. They are really, really thick. I'm a little skeptical, personally, about whether super thick irons and chip breakers do anything, but the guys at Lee Nielsen, they know what they're doing. And it's really good. So you can see here, the chip breaker has a machined surface instead of just being a bent piece of sheet metal like it is in a Stanley. The fit between the two of them is extremely precise. It's very impressive. The quality of the edge is good. Even the screw that holds it on is really great. It has a chamfer around the top. It's very nice. So just to kind of diagnose what's going on, one thing I can see right away is that the chip breaker, which is also called the cap iron, is set too far back. I've got probably a 32nd of an inch between the edge of the blade and the edge of the chip breaker. At that distance, it's really not doing anything. So that could explain a lot of the tear out problems we're having. Let me get this plane assembled and we'll see how it performs. So right off the jump, Russell said he was having trouble with the lever cap. This part right here, he said it felt very stiff to him. Now, the way these are supposed to work, hold on, let me pull this one off here. The actual fit between this cam lever here and the lever cap is supposed to be quite loose. All the tension is provided by a flat sheet metal spring underneath, and that allows these to snap shut and pop open really easily. There shouldn't be a lot of friction between the main body and the lever. Now here, I see what we might have is possibly a small manufacturing defect. The fit is extremely tight. I don't think this spring is actually doing too much because there's so much friction in here. But that could also be a really easy fix. Let's just go with a little bit of my trusty 3-in-1 oil. Try to work it back and forth a bit. Get some in there. So I can see that the walls of the mechanism are well coated with oil, and it's made only a very small difference. Ooh. Yeah, there's no question I've got oil in there, but it's not doing much. So I think there's a small manufacturing problem here, but I would call this a trivial detail. I would not be upset with Lee Nielsen for it. This thing is made of bronze, which means these parts are going to wear in, and this is going to loosen up naturally on its own. We've already talked about the iron and chip breaker. I don't see any problems there. I do see a good edge. It looks to me like Russell knows exactly how to sharpen. We'll check that out in more detail in a second. Let's look at the plane itself. There are no obvious problems with it. The frog appears to be set correctly. Everything is straight and clean and square. So let's assemble the tool. Okay. Iron goes in like that, and let's retract it up into the body. It fits really well. And then we'll drop in the lever cap. Boy, that is a problem. Okay, so Russell said he thought one of the problems that he was having was just setting it up. He hasn't had a bevel down plane with a chip breaker before, and he probably doesn't fully understand how to set it up. He knows this. I know just from reading on the internet that Lee Nielsen ships their planes with this screw here tightened down quite a bit to keep everything together in shipping. Now I see tool marks in here. Somebody's been in here with a screwdriver, so Russell probably backed it off. Maybe he didn't back it off enough. Let me get a screwdriver and let me back off this screw. Now you see how the lever cap is just sliding right into place? In case you don't have one of these, or you don't understand, there's a cam here that provides tension. That's what this lever is for. But the amount of tension that it applies is determined by this screw. So the tighter you put this, the more tension you get from this cam. Now the way this slides on and off, that's probably about right. Oh, slides off a little too easily. Now I'm gonna tighten it down. Ooh, that's still a lot. Ooh. There we go. Okay. That's pretty good. Okay. The lateral adjustment lever moves pretty well. Let's make another little adjustment here. It's often very helpful. Now this surface, the surface of the frog here, is very well prepared, but a little bit of oil on there never hurt anyone. Tends to make lateral adjustments that much smoother. There we go. The iron and the chip breaker look so much alike, I got confused and put it in upside down. I'm so used to Stanley's. There we go. That's much better. Great. Let's take this to a piece of wood and see how it performs. Now, I was all set to plane a piece of wood, but before I can even get to that, I see what part of the problem is. The mouth of this plane is set very wide. Now, Lee Nielsen might do this from the factory, I don't know, but let's just compare it to my vintage bedrock. You can see that mouth is quite small, and this mouth over here is so big by comparison. It's huge. That's something that you can just change the setting of, so we're gonna do that for sure. Let's do a little test planing first, just to see what experience Russell was having. Right now, I'm not taking any shaving, And I think one thing some people don't understand about bevel down planes is the adjuster is right here where your finger is. So you can put it on the wood, start moving it back and forth, and then slowly advance that adjuster until you're getting a shaving. So, no trouble here. Advancing that cutter very, very slowly until it just starts to cut, that's a great way to take a very thin shaving. Now, I'm not adjusted laterally yet. So let's, and the controls do perform, they're a bit stiff. The lever cap, there are problems here. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm getting good shavings here. These are fine, but I'm experienced with planes. I've been using them for a long time, and I own a lot of them. Let's try the board on the flat side. So these are really good shavings. I don't see any problem with these at all. They're wispy, just like we like. They fade away to nothing at the edges, so there's clearly a bit of camber on that iron. So that's good, and if we look at our board surface, that's a quality finish. So I'm gonna say that there are some problems with the way the plane is set up, but I'm gonna say another problem might be Russell is not familiar with bevel down planes, and he might have been trying to take too heavy a cut. A lot of people don't know to put the plane on the wood, start planing, and then slowly advance it until it just begins cutting. That's really an essential part of using this style of plane. Let's see what we can do to tune this thing up and make it work better. So Russell did a fine job sharpening this, but I like to sharpen everything that I have just so that I know I'm starting at ground zero. This iron is so thick. I usually just use the irons that come in my Stanley planes, and this thing's like triple that thickness. It's really something. So this is the sharpening rig that I made for my Woodwork for Humans series a couple weeks ago. Costs about 50 bucks, and it'll let us sharpen this. I don't even need to know which steel this is made out of because this rig will handle most steels I actually come in contact with. Another quick note here, I see the back of the iron might not be perfectly flat. I think they're lapped at the factory, and it looks like Russell did some additional lapping to it. I'm gonna go ahead and work the back of that iron on my fine stone, make sure it's really well polished, and then I'll sharpen. There's a much more consistent flat right all the way up to the edge. So I know that's good to go. Now we'll work the bevel. Okay, that is a perfectly sharp iron, hair shaving sharp. Now I know that's not going to be the source of our problems. Now that I know that my iron is perfectly flat across the back and well honed across the bevel, the next thing to do is to make sure the chip breaker is perfectly fitted. Now, folks at Lie-Nielsen did a great job with this chip breaker. This is the newer machined design instead of the bent metal design that you see on the old Stanleys. Veritas does this too. It's an excellent design. They've just taken a big piece of metal, they've machined a knife edge across it here, and then there's a lip with relief underneath it. So it makes contact along this very narrow strip right here, and then there's a little bit of space. So I have my iron here. The chip breaker with the chip breaker screw drops in to that keyhole right there. Then you rotate it back and over like this. That keeps the edge of the chip breaker well away from that edge that I just sharpened up. This would be a terrible time to mess up that edge. Now what I'm going to do is sneak that chip breaker so close to the edge. How close, you ask? As close as I can get it is the answer. It's like a slip of heavy paper, like that distance, less than a 64th of an inch. And then snug it up by hand so it won't move. Bring in, this screwdriver is too small, I need to stop using it. It's always important to size your screwdriver to the work. It keeps from stripping things out. Nice big screwdriver for a nice big screw. Now, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but here's the chip breaker side, and the iron is just poking up over the chip breaker. Now, what I would typically do is hold this up to the light. I have very bright filming lights on me right now, and I would look through this gap in the side and make sure there's no light coming through in between the iron and the chip breaker. The fit between these two parts must be perfect. Otherwise, shavings are going to get up in there and jam the plane and keep it from working. It looks good, but I gotta point out one, I think, shortcoming with this design. Everybody likes this machined chip breaker. I like it too. And on the old Stanleys, the chip breaker is literally a bent piece of mild steel that's just been rolled over into this hump shape right here. It's very easy to say, oh, well, that machine design, that's obviously better. Well, probably it's better, but it's worth pointing out that this design does work. Stanley made them like this for like over a century and never felt the desire to change it, so it's obviously effective. The other thing about it is this rounded, humped design on the chip breaker, it actually lets me see inside there. So when I take this one and hold it up to the light to check for light gap in between there, it's really easy to tell there's nothing. These two fit so closely together that I can't really see what's happening inside. The machining is so good in general, I'm just gonna have to sort of trust them. So now we're gonna do our final setup. Going to put the iron chip breaker, the cutter assembly in there, and I'm gonna get my lever cap, which is still very stiff. The oil is soaked in and it's not doing much of anything. So we'll put that cap on there and tighten it down. Nice positive action there. Now what we're gonna do is worry about that mouth. That thing is open like a barn door, and that is not helping. But here's where the bedrock design is very handy. I'm gonna loosen, wow, hopefully, let's go with a bigger screwdriver here. I'm gonna loosen the pins that hold the frog in place. There we go. They were very tight, which is fine. And then I'm going to advance the frog. Here, I'll try to do this up on camera so you can see. There, can you see? Now the mouth is much finer, still not fine enough. It's tough to get this in view while I'm doing it. I'm doing my best here. Okay, still not fine enough. That can still be advanced further. That is about right. There. Now, there's one small shortcoming to the bedrock design, which is that the bed of the frog is angled. So when you move the frog forward, it also advances the blade. It's a tiny thing, it's not a big deal, but it's worth keeping in mind. Anytime you change the position of the frog on these bedrocks, you also change how much iron is sticking out. So now I've closed up the mouth, but the iron is sticking out much too far. I'm going to retract it back in the body where I can't feel anything. Just these few little things I've done should be enough to get this plane functioning perfectly. It was good to begin with, so it should work now. Let's get it on some wood and see what happens. Okay, same piece of walnut, face grain. I have the plane not cutting at all. It needs a little bit of lubrication on the sole. I cannot find my oil can right now, so we're just going to put a little bit of 3-in-1 right on there. No, this will not interfere with finishes or cause any problems down the line. Oil is fine. I'm going to start planing, not getting anything, so I'll begin advancing that cutter. Oop, there it is. Wow. Okay, first shaving. That's really nice. Let's keep going. great. I think I can actually back that iron off a little bit. Yeah. This shaving is so fine, it's falling apart in my hand. I can literally see through it. This is a transparent shaving. I think on camera you can even see the back of my arm through it. So I think that's the best you could ask for. Of course, shavings don't matter. It's the surface that matters. That's excellent. Now at this point, I just wanted to test this plane out as much as possible on as many different species as I could. So I just pointed the camera at the bench and started pulling scraps out of my wood pile. I started off with a lot of just native North American species because these are what I work with 99% of the time. This is a piece of cherry, and you would expect any plane to do well with cherry. I'm getting fantastic shavings. They're very wide. They're the full width of the blade. The surface of the finish is excellent. Really good quality. So there's nothing else to find out there. Now I switched to red oak. This is a wood I use a ton of. We have a lot of it in Cleveland. Same thing, very good shavings, very clean surface, everything's smooth and level. Let's make things a little bit more challenging. I'm gonna move on to white oak, which is a bit denser and harder. It's still usually not difficult to plane, and this piece is like everything else. I'm getting good shavings, an excellent surface. There's just not much to say. When I'm using the species I use every day, this plane just does exactly what you would expect it to. There are no surprises here. But if you have a plane that's at York pitch at 50 degrees, is extra heavy, has an adjustable mouth, well, that plane should be more at home with exotic species. And luckily, my buddy D just gave me a bunch of scraps of exotics, so I have some stuff I can try out. I'm gonna start with this red heart, and this was amazing. It was so much fun. It is a blood red color. This is not the camera. This is really what it looks like in real life. And the contrast here at the end between the unplaned wood and the plain wood is like hilarious. It's so bright and vibrant colored. I also have here this piece of, it's either purple heart or ipe. I think it's ipe. It's tough to plane. You can see me pushing a little bit here. It's incredibly dense wood. And then there are some milling marks on it on the back. And with a smoothing plane, with a fine set, you're not going to take out milling marks. They're too heavy. So I'll concentrate on the flat part of the wood here. But it's fine. I get a really good surface. The last thing I'm going to use, I'm pretty sure this is lace wood. I'm really not super familiar with exotic woods, but it has a very heavy figure, lots of reversing grain, lots of opportunities to tear out. And here I feel the very precise slicing action of the Lie-Nielsen plane. It is cutting through, and the plane doesn't care whether it's going with the grain or against the grain. I get a very high quality surface no matter what. Now, all of that is very nice, but as long as I have the plane in the shop, it seems like I should do some head-to-head comparisons with some similar tools. The best one I have is this vintage bedrock plane that you saw earlier in the video. This is the pattern that the Lie-Nielsen planes are based on, and I think it's worth comparing them side to side. Now, this is not an apples-to-apples comparison. The Lie-Nielsen is in the bedrock pattern, but it has the benefit of really updated engineering, CNC machining in the manufacturing. It's made of bronze, which is way heavier, like astoundingly heavier. And it has the 50-degree York pitch frog, which is going to make it behave differently. Still though, this is the best comparison I can make with tools that are closest to being equivalent, and it's worth pointing out prices. I bought my bedrock pattern plane from a tool dealer. It was $150 shipped. The Lie-Nielsen is $350 shipped. So we're talking about a big difference in price, and I want to see how that stacks up in performance. So I think I'm going to get started with this piece of cherry. That's a good test piece because it planes easily. And I'll begin with the Lie-Nielsen. Which is outstanding. Let's move on to the bedrock. quick adjustment of the lateral. I would say the two planes perform similarly, but the Lie-Nielsen is the clear winner in the surface that it produces and in the ease of use. Let's try some of these exotic woods. Here's the red heart. Again, we begin with the Lie-Nielsen. Whoop! That is a heavy shaving. Let's back that off. There we are. Very, very fine shavings here. This one is it's literally like a ribbon. It's excellent. Let's bring in the bedrock. Wow. I mean, I have to give the bedrock credit. There is nothing the matter with that, especially right here at the beginning of the stroke. That's perfect. Let's do a little more. Yep. Yeah, excellent performance out of that. I think the most challenging piece of wood I could throw at it is this lace wood. This stuff appears to have just crazy grain, and it's a real opportunity for tear out. This long skinny piece is awkward. Again, the Lie-Nielsen is excellent and produces a good surface. This is where I expect the bedrock to not be as good. It's very difficult to see if there's a difference. Honestly, the two planes perform pretty similarly. I don't have a strong preference on this lace wood. Now, one thing the premium planes like the Lie-Nielsen are really renowned for is their ability to cut against the grain. This is an area where you're most likely to have tear out in normal planing. So I've taken a piece of oak here, and it has this rising grain right here at the end. Let me get a good shot of that. Now that's just a tear out factory right there. That is guaranteed to be a problem for almost any tool. So let's start with the Lie-Nielsen. I'm planing directly into opposing grain. Helps if you have the vise tight enough. So you can see right here where the grain is reversing, here's a good shot, there's no trouble there. I don't have any tear out. This is still, I have a tiny bit of tear out. I don't have enough to worry about. I would still use this in a piece of furniture. Now let's do the same thing, same place with the bedrock. So again, going against the grain in an area where I should have lots of trouble, I'm just not. So the planes are definitely similar in the way they perform. They're not exactly the same, but in the actual results of the planing that I'm doing, I'm not getting a huge difference. So Russell, you can rest easy. You bought a good tool and there is nothing the matter with it. I made a few very small tweaks to the setup of this and now it works flawlessly. I think you can expect decades of perfect performance out of this plane. But, there's kind of a subtext to making a video like this, which is that a lot of the people watching it are wondering, should I buy this plane? Is it a good investment? And the answer is, it's complicated because this thing costs a lot of money. $350 is a lot of money for a hand tool. It's a lot of money to me. But the reason that it costs so much money is because Lee Nielsen has just created an incredible achievement in engineering and manufacturing here. This plane is unbelievably well thought out. The tolerances are incredibly tight. I'm stunned by how good it is. I really just think it's an amazing tool. But that doesn't answer the question of whether or not you should buy one. Now, this tool, the way it is, with the bronze body and the high-angle frog, I would consider this to be a specialty tool. It's particularly good for somebody who works with exotic woods that tear out a lot, like the mahogany and red heart and lacewood that I used in this video. The features of this plane are going to help deal with those tricky grains. For me, as somebody who works with regular old North American hardwoods, the extra features of this plane are a liability, not a benefit, because the extra weight and the high-angle frog make this thing more tiring to use and more difficult to push. And for the woods that I use, they wouldn't give me a noticeable difference in output. So my regular old bedrock or Bailey pattern planes would work just as well on oak and ash and cherry. I would be spending the money to not really get anything that you could see in the quality of my work. And there's the question about premium planes in general. Should you get a premium plane? Well, I think for a lot of people, these planes, as great as they are, they might be more perfect than you need. If I'm just being honest, and I always try to be, I am an okay woodworker. I'm not great, I'm always getting better. I think I really will be good one day. But today, as I'm sitting here, I'm all right. I'm not working at the kind of level where I need the Stradivarius of hand planes. I don't need something incredible. A run-of-the-mill good plane, like a vintage Stanley, that's the level that I'm working at. Could very well be that 10 or 15 years down the road, when my skills are much higher, I might look at something like this and say, well, look, I need this now. I have left these tools behind. My skills justify something like this. And that might be a really reasonable thing to say. Another thing, though, is premium plane companies kind of make a promise when they market their tools. They promise you a tool that you can use out of the box. You can take it out and put it on wood and it will plane. They even sharpen it for you. And I think that's a 100% honest claim. They mean it and they're doing everything they can to deliver that result. But you'll notice that it didn't work out in this case. My viewer Russell bought this plane and he's done some woodwork and he owns at least one other plane. He's no dummy, but the plane did not work for him out of the box. And he actually got so frustrated with it, he sent the plane to some doofus on the internet to fix for him. So it's really worth pointing out that you might get your plane and be able to use it out of the box, and you might not. It's possible. I'm going to tell you a really quick story as I'm wrapping up here. When I first started woodworking over a decade ago, my father gave me this little guy right here. This is a Sargent number 3 size, and it is my first plane. I still have it. I'll probably always have it, even though I don't use it. And my dad is very handy, but he's mostly a mechanic, so he couldn't show me the finer points of using a plane like this. And it was not in great shape. It had to be restored. It had to be sharpened, all of that. And I'll be honest, it was a huge struggle for me. I spent about a year fiddling with this plane on and off. This was before there was a lot of maker content on YouTube, so you couldn't just go on the internet and find everything you needed to know about tools. And so it took me a long time to learn how to sharpen it, learn how to set it up right, learn how to get even to know what the right kind of shaving was. But it's interesting that what I got out of that process was an unbelievable understanding of hand planes in general. I own over 100 planes. I've fixed up and restored more than that. And I can tell you with complete honesty, there's nothing that can go wrong with one of these that I can't diagnose and fix. Now, maybe the casting's broken and I'm not set up to braze cast iron in this shop, but aside from that, I can fix literally any issue with the plane. I can even make some of the parts if I need to. There's only one thing that got me that education. It was being forced to slowly restore and fine-tune an old plane and learn every single thing about it because it just didn't work until I did. I think a lot of premium plane companies, what they're trying to do is they're telling you, well, look, if you spend enough money, you can buy your way out of that struggle. The problem is, the struggle is built into our craft. Woodwork used to have an apprenticeship system. You would go, usually at the age of 15, and learn the craft in someone's shop. And obviously, we don't have that anymore. Most of us are self-taught. I am mostly self-taught, especially in the beginning. And that's just going to be a struggle. You are going to fight with tools and sharpening and learning what you need and wood grain and joinery and picking glue and design. There's no getting around it. And I don't think you can buy your way out of it. I don't think even something like this is going to let you buy your way out of that struggle. You just have to go through it. I'm still going through it right now. So I think that premium planes are a great option for some people, but I think for a lot of other people, even if you had to pay $100 or $150 for something like this and still fix it up, well, people talk like, oh, that's just a distraction from the woodwork. I don't think so. I think that is the woodwork. I think that fixing up your tools and understanding every last detail about them, I think that is the craft. And I personally wouldn't trade that experience for anything. I also wouldn't trade the people who help make these videos possible, which is my way of transitioning to talking about my patrons on Patreon. They are the only reason I get to make these videos because they provide the direct financial support that makes this stuff possible. If you enjoy content like this, go on over to patreon.com/RexKruger and check out the rewards and benefits that I have for the people who make it possible for me to do this work. And I'll be back next week with more woodworking madness, something completely different. I hope you'll join me. Thanks for watching.